All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you very much for attending. Just a few housekeeping things to start off. Everybody's microphone will be muted for the presentation. If anybody has any questions throughout, you can go ahead and put your questions into the chat box, and we will get to them at the end. We'll also have time at the end for use cases or any examples that people want to go through. Also, this meeting is being recorded, so anybody who is in attendance or registered will be receiving an email after the webinar is completed with information and any links that we have talked about during the presentation. So everybody, welcome. My name is Douglas Knopf. I am the project specialist for the New York Natural Heritage Program's iMapInvasives team. I'm joined here today by Jennifer Dean, the Invasive Species Program Coordinator with New York Natural Heritage Program, and Amy Conway, the spatial ecologist with NYNHP, and we will be presenting on the topic of the iMapInvasives Terrestrial Invasive Species Prioritization Tool. So just a quick overview of how the presentation is going to go. Just a quick rundown on what iMapInvasives is and how we interact with New York Natural Heritage Program. I'll then hand it over to Jen, who's going to go over an overview of the tool itself. And then Amy will go over the live demonstration of the ins and outs of the prioritization tool. And then again, we'll have time at the end for any sort of questions or examples that people want to go over. So New York Natural Heritage Program is the organization that facilitates the conservation of biodiversity in New York State by being the record keepers and the surveyors for rare and threatened species and rare habitat types and ecologies throughout the state. And as one of the greatest threats to biodiversity is invasive species, the spread and establishment of invasive species, we have the iMapInvasives network within the New York Natural Heritage Program to house that centralized invasive species database to provide the support to our partners that conduct invasive species management. So our partners throughout the state include things like the Partnerships for Regional Invasive Species Management, the various state agencies like parks, DEC, ag and markets, and so on, as well as a whole host of other non-governmental organizations and such. And besides providing the centralized database for all of the information, we also have a host of different tools and functions in our database to help do the prioritization of management for these partners. This includes things like species distribution models, automatically generated reports that can be made on our database website, early detection and automatic alerts for certain species or areas of interest that you might have throughout the state, web map services, so you can have live view of our database on your website, and tracking and controlling efforts and results. So on top of just having presence data, we also have information for things like treatment data throughout the state. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Jen.
All right, thanks, Doug. Thanks for the good background on our program. And hi, everyone. So today, for this webinar, I'm going to assume that most of you have attended the 11 o'clock call where we gave a lot of background about the terrestrial invasive species prioritization tool that we're going to dive into for this session. But I wanted to give like kind of the 60-second cliff notes of what we talked about and what this tool is for those of you who were not able to attend that one. And there is actually like a very thorough project page as well that we have that we'll be able to share the link for that describes all the methodology behind this tool, and so you can certainly take your time to digest that at a later time. But the main purpose was we wanted to give everyone a chance to really get to dig into it and ask specific questions about what it can and can't do. But our Cliff Notes version is, so this tool is actually an update of a 2017 tool that the goal of this was to help natural resource managers prioritize where to focus their resources across the landscape of New York State. And so this, I guess, next slide, please. This combines conservation value, risk of spread, and the protection status of areas across New York. And so we had spatial layers, next slide, that combined different components of each of these categories. And so these 3 component layers were then accumulated into a 4th map layer, the comprehensive score. And next, please. And so with this 2024 update, we got the new spatial data that if there was new information that had been released since 2017, and many of them there were, and then added a few new layers, like for instance, for risk of spread, the iMapInvasives presence data was actually added to that layer as a one component of risk of spread. And then you can see the breakdown of how these scores were combined and weighted to come up with the comprehensive score for that orange and red map that you're seeing there is a spatial overlay or spatial model of essentially where high value ecosystems intersect with areas of high risk of spread. Next. And so we now have this great new map interface using ArcGIS online tools. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Amy Conley, who is our spatial ecologist, and she's the one, the brainpower behind this tool and the map interface itself.
Hi, everyone. I am the spatial ecologist at Heritage. You see my screen? Yep. Okay. So for those of you who weren't, if anyone wasn't on the first call, I'll do sort of a really quick navigation as long as I move this little window. Okay. So this is how the tool is going to present when you first open it up. You're going to see our comprehensive score, and most of all the data is going to be displayed in this large map window. You can see the legend in this scrollable window on the right. And what's the big difference between, probably one of the biggest differences between the 2017 and the 2024 version of the project is that you can click on the map and actually get the pixel value at the precise location, which was not something that was available to us with the AGOL tools that we had in 2017. You could just sort of look at colors. And now you can click around and get the precise score values. I like to actually, so quick tip, I like to dock this because otherwise the pop-up tends to just appear wherever you click and you can't see where you clicked and see the pop-up. It's a preference thing. But one of the things that we also wanted to provide was a little context with the score, because what does a comprehensive score value of 43 mean? Because there's a huge range. And what we show you down here is the histogram, which shows you how frequently an individual 30-meter pixel had a specific score. And you see there's a really long tail on this data. It's very skewed. So even though the maximum value you can see, there's a pixel, and I haven't quite located exactly where that pixel is. I think it's somewhere in the high peaks. It's 118. The average across the state is 16. So a comprehensive score of 43 is actually really higher than, in this case, 99% of the state. So we provide a little context in the pop-up for you. If any of you weren't on the call or if you want some refreshers as to that information Jen went over about what went into the comprehensive score, we also have this window in the bottom, which gives you a refresher on what went into each of the components. And if you're on the open call, you saw that part. Again, you can control the map layers in this version. Another tip is if you just want to deal with the map, you can hide the rest of the tool and interact with it the same way you would any normal AGOL map. If you're more comfortable with that format, you can turn the layers on and off. The little X'd out eye means it's turned off, and then the legends in the second view. I like having all the tools, but for some people that might be a little bit simpler. What you can also do is turn these off, is adjust the base map. This is something we didn't have time to go into, but you have at your access all of the Esri base maps. So if we were to zoom into an area and you were kind of interested in what the area was around it, you have all of the imagery. This is actually when the swipes can be very helpful. You can go back and forth and compare it with the bottom base map. We went over the swipe tool in the 11 o'clock call. This is, again, just another option for comparing if you find clicking on and off to not be your liking, or you're on a very slow connection, because what the swipe tool does is you don't have to load and reload the rasters. It's like a memory thing, so you can look at the comprehensive score and then pull this back and compare the comprehensive score on top. I have a little information stack that shows you how to use it in case you forget. But mostly the biggest thing to remember is just to completely ignore the leading layers tab. ArcGIS does not allow me to get rid of it entirely, but if you turn anything off there, it's going to just show all the time and it won't be useful. But this way I could say, okay, we have to have the layers on, and then you can drag them back and forth. Swipe tool, base maps. Oh, so another window in this section that we didn't go over on the previous call was the add data option. This is for if you have any additional layers or sources of information that you might want to use when making a prioritization. I'm going to change this base map because it is taking a bit to load. I go back to topographic. So to add data, I've added already. I went to New York State Parks, has their own feature service on HOL, so it's very easy to add any publicly served feature service. You copy this URL down here, and then you would, I've already added it, but you would paste it right in here, and it would add it to the map. And then it'll appear in this window. And so in this case, these little 4 button is the action button, and I want to add it to the map. I'm going to turn off swipe because that's probably confusing people. And now you can see the green layer, which shows up in your legend, is your New York State Parks polygon. So if you needed to, you can also add it to the table if you wanted to view that data in tabular format. You'd have to remember, if you want to look at the NIPAD data, to click on the NIPAD data tab or the Parks polygon tab. So if I, for example, I didn't know where a certain park was, you can, I don't know where Jacques Cartier is, but this is your little action tab, and I can say zoom to it. Oh, of course it's up near Canada. Okay. So there is the Jacques Cartier Park. It's kind of hard to see under it. Another kind of tip that we have, if you click on these buttons, you can increase the transparency. So if you want to make them a little more see-through. Unfortunately, it will not let me customize the symbology for the layers that I add. I've sent a letter to HOL thinking that might be a useful feature, but for the moment, any data you add is going to be in this sort of green font. But if you had parcels or boundaries or additional data that you wanted to add, you can add it in the simplest if it comes from a feature service. Scooch this over because what we went over in the earlier call is that we also have available for us the iMap data. And Mitch O'Neill has actually already updated the iMap data to now reduce the species that are available to just those that are terrestrial species. So in our terrestrial prioritization tool, if you click on the live iMap confirmed presence map service, you're going to be getting a live feature service of the terrestrial points. In some cases, you might want to only look for a certain species. So in that case, you would click on the 3 dots next to them and go to Add Filter. And in this case, I have filtered it for garlic mustard. If we turned it off and gave it a little bit, you would see that there's actually a lot more species. This is around Grafton Lakes. So there's all of the species at Grafton Lakes. If I want to organize a garlic mustard poll, or I'm interested in areas that are at risk from garlic mustard, we can filter it that way. And I'll show you on the polygon layer. So you would set filter, you would turn it on. These little toggles turn things on and off. So it's blue, it's activated. I would add a clause, and in this case, because I don't know the scientific names of all of the invasive species, I would go to unique, and it's going to generate little bit by bit, a unique list of all of the species that you have. So you could do this based on scientific name or any other field that's in that IMAP layer, but I want scarlet mustard. Now the polygons will be filtered based on, so it's remove the polygons that were no longer scarlet mustard. So that's a way to sort of fine-tune the IMAP data using filters. And then you can always turn them off. One other feature that we did not intentionally talk about in the call is this layer down here that we call the multiband layer. So the multiband layer was to answer a question that we got when we had some feedback on the first round of the project, was that people would look at areas that were really dark red, because again, they couldn't click on it. So they would look at areas that were dark brown. And sometimes they were dark brown because they were really high-risk areas, but there wasn't that much of ecological value near them. And sometimes they were dark brown because they were really high value, but they had less risk. Because it's a three-component score, you actually can have a high value or a sort of a middle value for very different reasons. And you can still investigate that by doing what I did in the first call, which is you would turn on your comprehensive score and the ecological significance score and the risk of spread and protected natural areas, and you click on it, and then you could go through the pop-up. Actually, I can probably do that now. So I click on this score, and then I would go to the left and say, okay, it's 19 for ecological significance, and it's 2 for risk of spread, and it's 20 for natural areas. So, that's why it got to 41. But there is sort of a more direct answer to what's driving that. It's just a little bit, and that was we made a red, green, blue color image out of those 3 scores. So normally when you look at a color image, they're all made up of red, green, and blue values that correspond to the pigments in nature. And in this case, we made this sort of artificial one where the red corresponds to how high your risk of spread score was, and your green corresponds to how high your ecological significance score, and your blue, how high your protected natural area score. And so the result is a map that sort of shows you what component is driving the score. So this is Zoar Valley, and this is the comprehensive. And if we pull it over, we can look at the multiband, and you can see some areas are brown because they're blue, they're in a protected area, and some are green. So they have a high ecological value, but they're outside of the protected area. And what's interesting is that where they correspond, where you have a high risk and a high ecological value, you get this sort of yellowish area. But where you have high ecological value and it's a protected zone, you get these deep blue, which you can sort of see in these parts of Zoar Valley. This is probably areas where you have high ecological significance because you also have multiple species, habitat models that probably highlighted this area down here. So in this case, you have a comprehensive score of 67. And you can, in the pop-up for the multiband, it actually shows you all of your scores at once. It did not let me parse them out in the pop-up window in as informative a way as I would have liked. But you have the 67 is your comprehensive score, and the next value is your ecological significance, which is very high. It's 41. And the next value is your risk, which is 6, which is very low. Then you have a very high natural protected area score of 20, so that's why you have it's in this very sort of electric blue area. It's where your highest stuff is in a protected state. Now, you'll see the blue often corresponds to areas that are in NIPAD. They're in some sort of protective area. So what this shows here is you can see areas that are green, so they were high in ecological significance, but they were 0 in protective areas because they were outside of the protected habitat. In this case, it's risky, so it looks like it's probably around development. And so in that case, it's green because the highest portion of its score is coming from the ecological sig. So it's interesting because there are areas that might have what appear to be sort of the same value, but they're very different habitats. So that's what sort of the multiband can kind of help with at a glance. You can see what's driving the score. I understand it might not be for everyone, but I personally love it, and it's like my favorite thing that we did on this project. And so I strongly advocated for including it in the tool. But it's if you would like it. Otherwise, you can still get all the same information by just clicking through and comparing the layers, either by turning them on and off or looking at them in the swipe tool. I think those were all of my additional points. If you have
yeah, I do have some. I just have to say that, like, with those multi-bands, I feel like we should be framing those because they look like works of art.
It's also really pretty. I will say that it's this might be too really technical, but it does. There's a way you can display rasters. It's called dynamic raster, where it looks at the values that are in your window and sort of stretches it between those two. We decided we were not going to use that on this project because, you know, if someone zoomed in to just hear it it's great at showing you like where the highest value of what you've got is, but we thought it might be too confusing to users. Because of the way that multiband works in ArcGIS, you have to have it to be dynamic. So which works fine at most scales, but it won't make sense if you zoom in too much. So I just want to point out that if you zoom in so far, you see it's going to gray out because it basically means you've zoomed in past the point where like the colors start to swap. So it is dynamic and the colors start to lose their images. So you want to use it sort of a moderate level zoom is where it works best if you're going to use it. I think it's fun. And so that's also where that special legend is, just to show you. The legend is also in the pop-up. If you forget and you're like, my goodness, what have I done? You can scroll down and it shows you kind of what the different color combinations mean.
One thing I have found helpful as I've been playing with this and like trying to set up like examples and stuff, sometimes I've had that moment of like, oh my gosh, how did I get to this setting and how do I get out? And I hit the refresh button and it goes back to the beginning.
Yes,
it will
nice. All, it will all, you can just refresh it and it will all go away and it'll bring you back.
Start.
Yeah, I'll go back to the pop-up. So I can also.
Great, thank you. And so I thought this might be a good time to pause and hear from all of you on the call, or, you know, anybody who has like questions or ideas of how to use this. I have some specific use case examples that like I'll try to drive through as not the creator, so you can see me fumble a little bit, but that's okay. But I wanted to give a pause right now and see if anyone had any questions. And I think, you know, you can either put in the chat box or just unmute yourself. I think it's a small enough crowd. We can all just kind of chat about this and make it more conversational. Do we have any, I guess, any questions in the chat so far? I haven't been watching those.
No,
I haven't seen
so
any.
far.
Okay. I guess maybe just kind of a question to this group. Has anybody on this call used the previous version for their work with like the prisms or at the state level and so forth? All right, so we might have like a new fresh
whole
crowd.
generation, all of them.
Yes. You don't have to be constrained by previous uses of this. Well, should I just jump into a use case then?
Maybe they'll have some.
And everyone can kind of take some time to, think about how they might use it. All right. So I am going to hit the refresh button. Are you all done with?
Yeah, I'm all done.
Okay. The magic start over. Okay, we are back to the beginning. So there were, on the presentation earlier, we did talk about a couple of different use cases that we've seen the prisms employ over the years. And one of those use cases is in, you know, for some prisms in their subcontracts that they, or funding that they grant out to their prism partners, sometimes they have the scores of the prioritization tool, the older model of the prioritization tool, as one of those criteria in their rubric. So if it was, say, a high ecological significance or a high comprehensive score, it might be, you know, a higher value within the ranking of those grants or so forth. And so I wanted to think about this from like a specific land manager's perspective. Like, what if I'm with the town, say municipality, and I want to see if I want to apply for a grant to control some invasive species in my town park. And so one of my examples here, say I am I am part of East Greenbush in the Capital District of New York, so you can search with that little magnifying glass for locations. It will kind of zoom you over there. And so it's getting me towards the center of that town. And you can actually use on the map layers, I can turn on or expand the boundary options. And so I can click on cities and towns. And so East Greenbush is, this little parcel is kind of, I don't know, parallelogram, or yeah, it's a shape. This is the town boundary, and I happen to know that my town park is over here in this one little area that's lit up. And so if I, let's see here, if I turn on the NIPAD parcels, so the protected areas database, you can see that we do have a few protected parcels in our town, but I'm specifically interested in my town park over here. And so if I click on that parcel, it brings up those, the mean, min, and max comprehensive score, ecological significance, risk of spread, and the protected natural area scores for, for that whole parcel. And remembering that, as you click on the map itself, these aggregate scores are looking at those 30-meter pixels, essentially. Because here you can see in this little pop-up box, this is one of 5 layers from what I clicked on. So if I go to the next, if I next over, this is just happening to tell me the comprehensive score of that one individual that I have, a pixel that I happen to click on at that moment. So if I clicked on another area, I would still get the same mean, min, and max for that NIPAD parcel, but the actual pixel that I clicked on for the comprehensive score, the ecological significance, and risk of spread, those are all going to be specific for that 30 meters. So just keep that in mind as you're looking around at this. And so if I needed to, so if I did want to, say, record those scores for my grant application, I could do that here. And if I was curious to see like how that matches up to like the statewide scores, here I can click on the view details about the prioritization models. And so with the comprehensive one, I had about a 26 score for my town park, and you can see that the statewide mean is 16. And so 26 is a little higher than the statewide mean, and there's a reminder here of like what data layers went into the comprehensive score. And then I can filter through and see the other histograms for the other component layers. And for my ecological significance, I had a 0.69, so it was quite low for my town park. And, a reminder of what was put into the ecological significance data layers is the known rare species locations for the state as documented within the New York Natural Heritage Program database, and the habitat suitability models made from those rare species locations and significant natural communities. So it just happens that, my town park might not have rare species there, and that's okay, we still love it. But so it doesn't rank very high in the ecological significance because of that. Risk of spread, I had about a 9 on there, which is a little higher than the statewide average. That's thinking about roads and development, it's in a pretty suburban area, so that makes sense. And then for the protected and natural area scores, this town park had a 16, which was actually quite higher than the mean. It is on a NIPAD parcel, so it's on a protected area, so that gives it quite a few points, and it's a natural area, and there are some riparian areas close to it as well. So that can explain some of those. And let's see here. So a couple other things I could do as a land manager to think about like how this model makes sense at that, parcel level. I can, so if I go over these map layers, say I want to increase the transparency of that NIPAD parcel because it's covering up some of the other layers there. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn off these model layers so that I just have my parcel with the topo map there. And then I can turn on, say, the iMapInvasives points. So that's at the very bottom. And a reminder that it is helpful to drag that up to the top, because the way that these online maps work, the layers on the top are the ones that show, you know, above the other ones. So you can see where we have some invasive species points there. We have some hemlock woolly adelgid as well. It just keeps popping. I know. Boo. Maybe I wanted to see, like, with my comprehensive score map, you know, what are some of the, without necessarily getting into the multi-band layer, I wanted to drag for myself the swipe tool so that I can kind of compare, like eyeball it in a sense. Like, so knowing my park, I know that there's a riparian area. It's kind of hard to see on the topo lines, but there is a little stream that comes in, and then if I turned on the satellite imagery, you'd see like a little water body over here where those red pixels of the comprehensive score light up. And so, you know, if I click on those points again, the first one that pops up is the parcel summary, but then if I go to the next one, like those parcel or the rasters, those 30-meter rasters closer to the water body or in that riparian area get a higher comprehensive score than, say, the ones further away or closer to the, you know, more in the parking lot. All right, let me close that. All right, and then one other thing I wanted to point out, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the iMap layer as I drive away from there. I'm going to go ahead and decrease the transparency of the NIPAD parcels so they pop a little bit more. So that we have you know, this data from the protected areas database, right? And actually, I'll turn off the swipe too, because that's confusing me as I zoom. Just one thing to keep in mind that some parks and so forth are multiple parcels. So the Albany Pine Bush is a good example of that. There are multiple parcels of the Albany Pine Bush Preserve that are scattered, and sometimes they're even adjacent to each other, but they're still separate parcels. So you as a land manager would just need to make a decision on how you want to interpret those, you know, those aggregate scores for each of those individual parcels. And that's just how that preserve is recorded in the NIPAD database. All right. And then one other example I wanted to think about was more from a regional perspective. So once again, I'm going to refresh, start fresh. And so thinking about like a regional staff or the prisms who need to make decisions about, say, where they're going to send their summer crew for that field season and so forth. So with this, I'm also going to work within the NIPAD parcels. And I guess just, you know, a little step back as I turn that on is just one of the reasons that we picked these protected areas as kind of like I guess the main boundary type for these aggregate scores was it seemed to make the most sense from a natural resource management perspective. We threw around different ideas, like could you do a town aggregate score, or could you do like tax parcel aggregate score? And theoretically, Amy's shaking her head, no, we could not see that.
Tax parcels,
yeah. Tax parcels they make no huge mess. Yes. It becomes very complicated very quickly.
Also, several counties charge for them, and we do not have tax parcel money.
Yes, exactly. So these parcels that are from the protected areas database made the most sense to work on from this perspective. Let's see here. So if I turn on the NIPAD layers, and let's say I want to actually focus on one of the prisms. So there are these tools in the bottom left-hand corner under the blue band. There's a filter tool there, and Amy did show this during the presentation. It's a kind of a quick filter of two things that we feel like you would be hitting the most. And so if you want to hit or filter by prism, you would just unhighlight any prisms that you want to exclude and then apply it for just your prism. So say I just want to look at SWILO, and I can do that, and that eliminates the NIPAD parcels from the other parts of the state. And so now I can just, you know, focus on the data for that. I can also play around with this comprehensive score percentile rank filter. And so if I wanted everything that was 90 percentile or higher for the state, you can see that it eliminates all the other ones. So let's say if I go down to, you know what, I'm going to, yeah, let me turn off actually these other layers right for a moment so it pops more. I'm going to turn off the model layers. Here we go. So you can see the NIPAD parcels a little more clearly. So if I go down to 50 percentile and I apply, then you'll see a lot more parcels that pop up in SLILO that are, you know, in the top 50% essentially of the comprehensive score. But I'll go ahead and cancel that one. So now it's showing me all those parcels within SLILO. And there's another tool that I can use down here, this table tool. And this is now a exercise of screen real estate, especially when you're on a laptop.
I'll drag it up to the top.
And then drag. Yeah. Okay, here we go. So that we can.
You really don't need all of the columns. So.
Yeah. All right. So this gives us, you can see down at the bottom, there's this total. So that shows me the total number of NIPAD parcels that are in my current filter selection, right? So I have 1,713 that are in there, filter selection for the SLILO prism. And then let's say I wanted to focus on ones that had the highest ecological significance. So you can see these table scores. You can actually play around with the columns themselves. You can turn off and on, like if I didn't necessarily want the NIPAD unit, I could get rid of that, and it gives you a little more real estate as well. But I want to sort by ecological significance. So if I click on ecological significance, it first sorts by, you know, from lowest to highest. But if I click it again, it'll sort from highest to lowest. So of these NIPAD parcels within SLILO, we have some that are getting up to a mean ecological significance score up in the 40s, well up into the 40s. And so, you know, that's pretty informative. I can click on these, and then maybe I need to zoom in a little bit. There is a little blue highlight that appeared when I clicked on it.
You could also zoom to it if you couldn't find it and you selected one. Okay, click on the 4 dots.
Right there? Oh, these 4 dots. Okay, the action.
And then zoom to. So if you couldn't find it, because it was really small and they highlighted it, like that's one part. Again, this is because of how the parcels are in NIPAD. This is a very small NIPAD.
Yes, yes. Okay, excellent.
So if you can't find it, you could always.
Right, right. And you can click on multiple rows here in the table. I do find you need to be a little patient, at least with older computers, to watch it highlight, but it will accumulate a number of highlighted, and they call these selections. So down at the bottom, you can still see I have, you know, 1,713 filtered parcels, but the selected ones I have now that I've clicked on in the table are 6. And you can, there's a little button to clear your selection, so it'll just unhighlight those parcels at that moment. But now I know that there are definitely some ecologically significant parcels within the SLILO area. You know, that's due to known presence of rare species in significant natural communities. Let's say I just want to focus on some of those top ones. So if I'm kind of scrolling through the list, you know, just as a way to quickly filter through these, I'm looking at like maybe the top 20 or so are above 30. So say I just want to look at the parcels that are above a mean ecological significance score of 30. So I'd go back to this actions tool that's over in this upper right-hand corner of the table. And there is a set filter, which is just a more detailed filter of what you played with. Oh, my filter window kind of is hiding from me. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to drag that around. Is there a way to make it?
You can hide the table. Like, see that little double arrow?
Yes.
Yeah, so now it just becomes
black. Thank you. All right. So I want to, I have to toggle on the filter, and I'm going to add a clause. And so I want, so this this is getting to, you know, higher level features here. And if you're familiar with ArcGIS, this is probably very comfortable for you. But if you're not, then, you know, it's kind of getting into new territory, but it's okay. Let's see. So if I want to say, look at my ecological significance scores, I just typed in eco on the type ahead, and it gives me which fields have that text string. And so I want the mean ecological significance score, and I want it to be greater than 30. So I'm going to type in 30 there, and then if I kind of click out of that, then look, it's going to filter out things. Ooh, yes, and I can expand my table now to show that now there are 13 total parcels that are in that category there. But that's not too many, so maybe I want to, you know, I want to consider more than just 13. So let's say I pop this down to 20. And then a few more parcels have appeared on the map. Let me pop open this table here. So now I have 37 total parcels that are above 20 on the ecological significance score. And so, and a lot of those I can see are clustered around the Alvar grasslands there, which is a, you know, significant natural community for New York State, and there's a lot of amazing rare species there, so that makes a lot of sense. So maybe now that I have this kind of filtered down to the top 30-some most ecologically significant parcels based on the rare species information, maybe now I want to think about which ones have the greatest risk of spread. So I'm going to click on that column, see if this is a little nuance I just realized earlier. When I am sorting the table by a certain variable, it turns blue, which is great. It shows you which way it's going. But then if I click on another one, suddenly it's giving me like now 2 sort orders, yeah, which doesn't necessarily make sense since it's not categorical.
Or you can click the dots and it'll tell you like that whether or not you want to sort it as ascending or descending. Right. So I'm gonna unsort. I just want to make sure I unsort the ecological significance, because now I just want to focus on risk of spread. And so now I have it right. The little arrow is pointing down, so it's descending. So I'm looking now at the top ecologically significant parcels sorted by risk of spread. So if I click on that top one and I zoom to it, because I can see it popped up, but let's use the action to zoom to that. Sorry, sound effects are not included. And so I zoomed to it, but I zoomed back out so that we could get a better perspective. But yeah, so you can see where it's on this peninsula point here that these really the highest risk of spread parcels are popping up that have the high ecological significance. And so it's just another way that you could, you know, use the data to, you know, based on your criteria to start prioritizing where your efforts might be. All right, so those were my 2 use cases. Any comments or anything? No? Okay, I got thumbs up from you, so I'm happy. All right, so I guess at this point, yeah, we would love to hear from any of you. If you have anything you want us to drive to, or you know, any questions or ideas of how to use this, we'd love to hear from the audience. It's a quiet group today. All right, well, do we have, Doug, have you put the link, or could you put the link to the project page? Oh, actually, I have it open. If you have it. Okay. Actually, I'll put the link to the project page here under chat. Pretty much that, thank you. Okay, and so you can explore this
and at your own time, and certainly reach out to us with any questions or ideas. Oh, I do see now that I opened the chat. Thanks, Sam. We have a comment from Sam that the multi-band function is very cool. You made Amy's day. Yes. Excellent. Yeah, we want folks to use it and of course, provide us feedback. And right, we really appreciate that you came out to learn some more about it and see us geek out on cool features like that. All right, with that, oh wait, we have another comment. Appreciate the, I don't use the tool, I contribute to the data, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, that's a great comment to like make me realize my expression of gratitude to all of you who do enter data into iMap, and your information is extremely valuable, and it gives us the opportunity to create tools like this. Thank you.
And I guess, you know, at any point anyone is using the terrestrial prioritization tool and any questions do come up, you can feel free to reach out to us at any time. So you can send us an email directly at iMapInvasives@dec.ny.gov, and we can get back to you with any questions you have. Looks like a question just did pop up.
Ooh. All right, let's see. Ari from APIP.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, which one? Okay, so I was seeing the models reflect the ground characteristics. Yes, the models are meant to reflect sort of the risk model in terms of invasives is general risk of terrestrial invasive spread. We did not do different risk models for different kinds of invasive species. Maybe we do have that for, we have something like that in the aquatic invasive tool, right? We did suitability for different classes, but we did not, we didn't do that approach for this one. So it's kind of based on the general ecology of the area.
And a lot of human impact.
Yeah, mostly human impact.
Yeah. And then a question about iNaturalist data. Oh, no.
Well, does iNaturalist go into iMap?
So that's a good question. So iNaturalist, there are some high priority iNaturalist records that we do pull directly into the iMap database. But for the most part, iNaturalist is a separate layer that you turn on in iMapInvasives. So when you're on the iMap interface and you search for a species, you can select on the map table of contents to turn on the iNaturalist layer, and it'll show you that, and it gets included in the email alerts and the reports as iNaturalist records, but we don't consume the whole iNaturalist database because it would blow up our database. So there's so much data. So no, we did not use the data for invasive species in iNaturalist for the, which is in the risk of spread component. Yeah, we just used the iMapInvasives data for that. But good question. Oh, and then one more thing.
Prioritizing areas versus, yes.
All right. Excellent. Yes. Yeah, thank you. All right. Great questions and comments, everyone. Thanks so much. I guess we can go ahead and close it out. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all very much. And also, I just want to shout out, while everyone is still here, we do have our next monthly webinar is posted on our website. So we have one more webinar for 2024, if anybody's interested on the topic of all the updates to iMapInvasives for 2024.
Excellent. And I do see a question came in from Patricia right at the end there, asking about how to get a new species added, I'm guessing, to the track species list in iMapInvasives. Please email us. Yes, so we do have a process in which we, in conjunction with New York State DEC, we add species to the iMap track list for New York. But the first process is please send us an email with, your experience with that new species, like any photos or documentation is great for us to then further explore, and then we have to work with DEC to get that species added. Great, thanks everyone.